I'm sure that you're familiar with Sonic Unleashed. It's, of course, one of the most popular Sonic games of all time, and it seems to only get more popular as time goes by. One of its most iconic features are the environments, which are based on real-life locations, integrating aspects of their architecture, urbanism, and culture into the game, celebrating them, creating beautiful landscapes and a world that feels alive and cohesive. However, have you ever asked yourself how and why they are portrayed the way they are? I mean, what's the reason behind Apotos' whitewashed buildings or Mazuri's mud huts? And why do the people in Holoska live in igloos and the like? I asked myself the same questions, and as such, today we'll be looking at exactly that. How the history of the nations depicted in Sonic Unleashed shapes the architecture, culture, and overall aesthetic, and how that defines the environments and the game as a whole. I want to explicitly say that I'm no expert in the study of any of these cultures or their history. I'm making this video due to my own curiosity and because I do genuinely want to learn about this topic. So if you do know more than me about a specific subject in this video, please feel free to correct me or to share some more information in the comments, and I'll try to bring as much attention to that as possible. So let's take a look at these locations. The first location you visit in the game is Apotos, clearly inspired by Greece, specifically the island of Mykonos, which is what the area is called in the game files. The flag of Apotos is also very similar to the Greek one, with 4 white and 5 blue horizontal alternating stripes. However, while the Greek flag has a cross representing Christianity, Apotos has an anchor, probably just representing that they're people of the sea. Apotos is very clearly modeled after the Cycladic islands in the Aegean Sea, of which Mykonos is a part of. Their vernacular architecture, characterized by clusters of cubic whitewashed houses, flat roofs, and narrow stone lines, are modeled by their local history and climate. Their inhabitants painted walls white with lime plaster to reflect the intense sun, and built thick masonry walls of 60 to 80 centimeters and small windows for insulation against heat and the strong Aegean winds, called the Etesians. Some of the houses are even built underground or carved in the hills to protect the interior from direct sunlight, keeping a constant temperature throughout the year. However, the main reason behind these looks was due to cholera. In 1938, cholera broke out in Greece, and because of the outbreak, then dictator Metaxas passed a law stipulating that all islands in the Cyclades needed to be whitewashed to stop the spread. The material used for this was the mentioned limestone, as it was considered a disinfectant. These islands, in an urbanistic sense, often grew as tight labyrinths for defense and to channel sea breezes, without any real plan on how to develop this town, similarly to other European cities at the time. Prominent motifs all around include the blue dome churches and decorative balconies. While the whites are used to reflect the sunlight, since it doesn't absorb the heat as much, the blues are celebrated as a Greek trademark. Mykonos particularly is famous for its white cylindrical windmills with conical straw roofs, originally built by Venetians in the 16th century to grind grain. Of course, Apotos takes heavy inspiration from this, that's why it's called Windmill Isle. The NPCs don't really wear any traditional clothing, most opt for simple shirts or pullovers, although some do wear more traditional clothing, like Anastasia and the priest Gregorios. Of course, the sailor and his kid wear sailor outfits. When you take all of this into consideration, it's apparent that Apotos faithfully recreates these elements. This hillside town is full of said whitewashed buildings with brightly painted balconies, stone-paved streets and plazas, and a seaside promenade. The Mykonos windmills appear overlooking the village, echoing the real windmills' presence. However, the game does also depict the original inspiration in a more uniform and saturated way. For example, the game's blue and red balcony accents and flower-draped terraces are a lot more vivid than the subtler Greek palette, even if the original elements, like the flat roofs, arched doorways, and prominently white and blue color schemes are present. Of course, this was made for gameplay and just art direction purposes, since the objective isn't to create photorealistic locations, rather just something that resembles the original material while also being more fanciful. In that sense, Apotos' architecture and layout mirrored the way Greek history and the environment shaped Mykonos and the grander Cycladic archipelago. Bright white cubic homes oriented for light and wind, communal outdoor spaces, and the distinctive windmill and church silhouettes that define these seaside towns. Mazuri is the second area you visit in the game. Evidently, it draws inspiration from Saharan and East African village styles, combining traditional features from the Sahel region, specifically Mali and Niger, and savanna biomes like the Serengeti in Tanzania. If you look at both locations in the world map, the combination may seem weird, but it does work pretty well and does manage to create something that looks real but not at the same time, which was the objective. Traditional Sudano-Sahelian architecture uses adobe plaster and mud brick, resulting in the famous earthen-colored walls with buttresses and minimal openings for insulation against the extreme heat and cold. This is exemplified by West African mosques, specifically the Great Mosque of Djenné, from which the game takes a lot of inspiration from. Massive adobe structures with taping towers and wooden support beams protruding from the facades. The rural villages use simpler materials. Round thatched huts, called rondevelles, with woven or mud-covered walls are common across sub-Saharan Africa. Each house also has a sort of totem above the entrance, representing animals like a crocodile, a lizard, a fish or maybe a snake, and what appears to be a bird. The choice of an animal, reptile, fish or bird was driven by the survival instinct of these people, and it's believed that the chosen creature contributed in some way to the survival of the clan. Since each house has a different one, it's either used to identify the specific household or it's an inheritance to the family, carrying deep religious and spiritual significance that can be connected to their ancestors. The environment of grasslands dotted with baobab trees from Madagascar, acacia thickets and animals like giraffes and zebras help to shape the local life and the type of environment you're dealing with. Savannah Citadel explicitly resembles multiple mud brick structures which seem to be part of a massive whole, while surrounding hamlets are composed of small circular huts and simple dwellings. Evidently, the color palette is predominantly brown and earthen, as mentioned. Cultural motifs like market stalls and drums are also present, showing the trading and communal traditions of these villages. The shop in the Mazuri hub world features many traditional products from the region, specifically the boggle and fini, a handmade Malian cotton fabric featuring many different patterns, masks probably inspired of the Kanaga mask from the Dogon people, the ones from the Marca/Bambara people, and other shields commonly seen across the different tribes that inhabit the area, food products from the region like millet or sorghum, peppers and eggplants, and other crafts and instruments, such as drums, commonly used in music from the region which is also reflected in the soundtrack, wood carvings of animals and baskets. The NPCs around Mazuri have garments clearly inspired on the Maasai people, with a dominant red checked cotton cloth called shuka, symbolizing courage, strength and unity. The footwear is also similar, as these people traditionally wear sandals, and of course wear the famous multi-strand bead collars and bracelets, protecting the wearer spiritually. While how they look can mean multiple things in real life, such as age or marital status, in the game they're mostly identical between NPCs, so they don't have that much meaning. The heavy earrings and stretched earlobes are usually seen as a symbol of beauty, wisdom and maturity, which can also be seen in the game. Compared to reality, Mazuri really is unique. It mixes Malian and East African elements, like Timbuktu-style adobe courtyards and Serengeti wildlife, something that isn't usually seen, if at all, due to the cultural and nature differences. Nevertheless, its architectural motifs and environmental context clearly echo real African rural culture. Holoska isn't the third area you visit, but it's the one I want to talk about now. While the name sounds similar to Alaska, it's mostly inspired by the Arctic Inuit culture in general, which do inhabit it, but predominantly large parts of northern Canada, Greenland and Russia. However, there's some evidence to suggest that Finland is also represented to some degree. Both countries are in the north, their flags have the same colors, and there's an NPC called Jari-Pekka, the 314th most common male given name in Finland, belonging to 1,254 male individuals, and as a middle name to 39 more as of February 2023. Traditional Inuit peoples have always lived in extreme northern climates and built structures from local materials, wood and snow mostly. Of course, they're famous for their temporary winter shelters known as igloos, built by cutting blocks of compacted snow into domed forms with a hole at the top for ventilation. Each block is a rectangle measuring about 60 by 120 centimeters, being 20 centimeters thick. Multiple blocks are subsequently added and shaved off in a slope to form the dome. For windows, clear ice blocks or flattened steel intestines were used. This design maximizes insulation as it traps body heat in a snow shell. This is perfectly mirrored in the game too. You can see small ice blocks around the igloos and a rounded point at the top from where you can usually see smoke coming out. There are also communal fireplaces with a pot cooking, representing the sense of community these people have between each other in their small villages. Also in the Holoska hub, there are sleighs that act as rails for Sonic to grind on, decorated with patterns. The most noticeable is a stylized snowflake or star motif. Similarly, Holoska's flag features a type of snow crystal or star, resemblant of the ones from the sleighs. Other decorations include repeating diamond and triangular shapes, often etched with polygonal diamonds in contrasting colors with the wood. These patterns do echo motifs from traditional Inuit art, however generalized they may be. For example, 100-year-old Amauti sashes have woven diamond patterns. While not exactly what's seen here, it's supposed to represent the same sort of design choices. Similarly, Inuit beadwork and Amauti decorations use linear and geometric geometric designs, commonly displaying horizontal bands, vertical columns, and shapes such as zigzags, chevrons, triangles, and diamonds. These shapes can carry some meaning or serve as identity markers. For example, the star/snowflake usually alludes to a celestial or environmental phenomenon, like the North Star. The game also depicts the villagers in furs. These are called parka, which are usually made of caribou or seal hides to maximize warmth. The fur-lined hood and cuffs are also functional as they trap warm air and prevent their face and fingers from freezing. These are often double-layered with fur on both sides to trap air, allowing for more mobility too. Holoskas also have a black and white diamond pattern, which forms the shape of a fish. This curiously mimics a known pattern in Yupik sewing and beadwork, as an alternating diamond, checkerboard or strip pattern is used in these colors, along with many other that can be done. These patterns are used as quote-unquote pretend shapes. They can be boxes on top of each other, windows, teeth/mountains, mountains with reflections, braids, a river, sled runners, or a seashore. In the game's case, they're pretend fishes, a pattern that I don't think really exists, but does add to the uniqueness of the game and the disconnection from reality. These parka trips convey identity, as unique patterns are family or community symbols. The templates are merely a custom passed by the seamstresses. Considering how some of these patterns reflect local life, like the mountains and the teeth, it's presumable that Holoska does have a ton of fish, also evidenced by how you can buy a lot of it here. So even if the pattern might be fictionalized, it draws on the idea that trim patterns are meaningful markers, not just some random decoration. Also, the steep terrain and mountain peaks closely resemble Greenlandic and Alaskan landscapes. Holoska's design is stylized, as expected, but it still manages to capture the essence of Inuit adaptation to cold. Such an example is the fact that there are penguins around. Considering how Holoska is supposedly in the North Pole, it contributes to the fantasy setting, since they inhabit the southern hemisphere. Set against the polar wilderness backdrop, it has many details of this culture that go very unappreciated and largely unnoticed. Spagonia is very clearly a European-style city, specifically southern, drawing from countries like Italy, Spain, France and Portugal, and blending these architectural traditions and cultures into a single place. Historically, these Mediterranean cities feature stucco or stone masonry buildings painted in warm earth tones, with orange-red clay tile roofs to suit a sunny climate and reflect sun rays. Renaissance and medieval influences appear in narrow cobblestone alleyways and town squares. Much like these cities nowadays, Spagonia features both narrow labyrinthic streets and larger straight streets that were urbanistically planned. This contrast is very much present in cities such as Lisbon. In Portugal and Spain, colorful ceramic tiles often cover building facades and interiors for ornament and temperature control. While Spagonia doesn't specifically have them, its streetscapes reflect these countries' heritage, as nearly all buildings have terracotta tiled gabled roofs and pale plaster walls, much like a Tuscan hill town or a Catalan village. Spagonia's architecture includes arcaded plazas and cathedral domes that recall Italian ones, specifically the Piazza del Campo in Siena, as well as parks and fountains that evoke that common European urban design. The houses all have that same Mediterranean/Italianate architectural style with tons of protrusions, arches, bay windows and balconies with wrought iron railings, while the shops and cafes have awnings at the top. Another thing with these houses that you usually don't see is that, considering how the streets usually go up and down small hills and stuff, they are sometimes built above the ground level. As such, the foundations of a lot of houses can be seen, specifically in Rooftop Run. This happens because the finished floor level is usually above where the ground is because of where the entrance will be, normally in another street. In these cases, elevation of the house is made so that it isn't partially underground, while the entrance area is mostly at ground level. However, in some cases, the entrance to the house will also be located above the ground instead of at the ground level, which can happen for multiple reasons. In Rooftop Run, though, that reason can't be determined as there's nothing behind these houses. It's just trying to replicate this architectural quirk, which it does well. Furthermore, the shops in town reflect popular products and services from these countries, like bakeries, hairdressers, florists, butchers, produce stores, and other variety shops. There's a cafe in the plaza with a promenade on the main street and another on a terrace above, also something very typical in the region. Much like the other Western-inspired locations in the game, the NPCs don't really have a specific traditional attire or facial feature that would make them stand out. Well, I guess that most Spagonians do kind of have long noses. Additionally, the main landmark in Spagonia is, of of course, the university. It's clearly meant to represent the vast number of universities these cities have, and how they were pioneers in creating these institutions. A lot of the more traditional European cities are considered student cities for that specific reason, with Spagonia being no exception to that. Other points of interest include the massive aqueduct, which also represents the vast number of them built by the Romans in cities like Lisbon, Barcelona, and other Italian cities, and the clock tower, another prominent motif in these cities. The mountain in the background of Rooftop Run also represents the large hills that can be seen in the distance in a lot of these cities. Compared to the real thing, Spagonia is an obvious mixture of these different countries. The orange roof tiles and cobblestones are meant to resemble these historic cities, combined with key visual motifs such as arched doorways, narrow stair-lined streets, and wrought iron balconies that reinforce the old world feel. As such, it accurately portrays the built fabric of Mediterranean/Southern European cities, shaped over centuries of Roman, Moorish, and Renaissance influence. Chunan is explicitly inspired by traditional Chinese architecture and culture. The village is set among green hills with rivers and waterfalls, resembling a more extreme example of rural China's landscape. In particular, the game features the Great Wall of China winding through the mountains. The architecture itself depicts classic Chinese forms, such as sloping grey tiled roofs with upturned eaves, wooden beams, and lattice windows. The town is also a CA1 compound, in other words, a courtyard enclosed by buildings on all sides, with another smaller one inside that acts as the village's shop. Historically, China's north sought maximum sunlight with south-facing courtyards. As such, Chunnan's structure may likewise face south, with symmetry playing a very important role. In the stage hub, there's a pagoda tower, a Buddhist temple which were prominently built during Chinese imperial times. A paifang stands before its entrance too, a gate with a multi-tiered roof supporting posts, archway shapes, and decorations, Chinese lanterns in the game specifically, which also adorn the entire town and lit it up at night, as well as lily pads and lotuses, two very prominent elements of China's flora. There's also another paifang in the town symbolizing the town's exit. The paifang leading to the pagoda specifically has a sign reading Since I don't know how to speak Mandarin, I can't really understand it. If you can read this, please leave a comment explaining its meaning, though to be honest, I'd guess it isn't really supposed to mean anything. Similarly, the town features two banners with two traditional Chinese idioms. The first reads 开张大吉, meaning something like good luck in your new business or a grand opening with great fortune. Basically, it's a wish of good luck for opening businesses, while the second reads 万事如意, something along the lines of may all your wishes come true, which is a popular Lunar New Year blessing. Another thing commonly found around the village are these grid patterns on wooden doors, windows, screens, and furniture, carved with lattice work and bas-reliefs, which are carvings that rise from the background. These are called 珠廊, in other words, window lattice. While they do work for ventilation and to let in light in some specific situations, they do have some symbolism, specifically regarding the aesthetics, showcasing the artisan's exquisite skills and pursuit of beauty. It's said that in ancient times, one's house usually told much about their taste, status, and wealth. As such, much attention was paid to the architecture. These are legacies from the Ming and Qing dynasties, and are formed by fine wooden strips arranged in specific patterns and layouts to create a lattice grid. They are meant to reflect the Chinese philosophy of the harmony between man and nature, and can even depict a specific scene or tell a story, reflecting the social phenomena and historical cultural background of the time. Other more intricate patterns can also be found on this gong, for example. Despite Chunan being a more traditional setting, the NPCs around town don't really dress in a specific way. Most of them just seem to have some coats, shirts, and other clothing that does seem more traditional, but I don't really know the specifics. However, each one does have a name that reflects their personality or status within the village. Once again, I'm no expert in the language, and since multiple characters are read the same way though mean different things, I may not be 100% accurate with this. Chun, one of the children in town, may mean spring, pure, or simple/honest. Yilin, the other child who's with him, can mean happy jade. Lin can mean forest, being a common surname in China. Hualin can mean flower forest, and Zongchen something like the deep roots of the clan, which is corroborated by the fact that he's pretty old and apparently the best doctor in the world or something. Other signs in town seem to be some poetic idioms, like something about the autumn moon stirring the water, deep emotion and fragrant intent, and mirror swords splendid and auspicious. Of course, all of them probably not right, but are most likely simple slogans for the shops. Compared to real Chinese villages, Chunan mirrors them well. Its detailed temple columns and carved brackets are very much alike these, with a mostly grey, white and red color scheme. The rustic villagers and farm fields capture the rural lifestyle, as well as the Great Wall of China motif in Dragon Road and the huge mountains helping to set the environment and atmosphere perfectly. Shamar is a desert city clearly rooted in Islamic and Nabatean architecture, explicitly inspired in Petra, with multiple sites of it present in arid sands, and other Arab cities. Shamar itself is called Petra in the game files. Petra is known for its rock-cut architecture, with tombs and temples carved into sandstone cliffs, which are also represented in-game. The Shamar town, though, incorporates broader Arabic and Islamic elements. The buildings are mostly made of mud brick, giving them a sandy earthen look. While the apparent building methods come from traditions that are centuries old at this point, the buildings themselves have a bit more modern designs, with tons of protrusions and layers of detail, with every building having mostly the same appearance due to focusing on structural stability. Also, there are a lot of arched passageways, a common motif of this architectural style, as well as date palms, a tree widely cultivated across northern Africa and the Middle East. The area where you can walk around in Shamar seems to be a souk, a generic term that describes a traditional North African/Arabic market or commercial area. Much like in real life, the market in Shamar has shade sails. Contrary to the real ones though, these ones don't provide much of it. However, the town is built in a way where shade is maximized, especially because of the tall buildings which are built very close to one another. The same principle goes for the houses on the outskirts, which are built in higher areas and thus protect the streets from the sun. The town also has rills, which not only provide a more soothing sight compared to the bright yellow palette, but also helps cool the air and irrigate the trees. These also exist to organize a town's layout into a quadripartite pattern converging on a small point at the center, called a charbag, which is from Indo-Persian tradition. While Shamar's design doesn't really converge at a specific point like that, its layout is clearly divided into smaller rectangular sections by these rills, being a clear inspiration of this architectural style. Back to the market, here you can see things like spices, apples, kilims, which are decorated rugs, Arabic decanters, plates, ceramic jars, and other products being sold. In some of these stalls, you can also find signs with some text. For example, this one has an Arabic word at the top and then text in English, but with an Arabic font of some kind. The Arabic word is supposedly falafel, please correct me if I'm wrong, and the rest of the text reads, extremely sweet cake, a lot of cakes are sold. Another one reads, establishment, 80 or maybe 10 years, something of the highest class that uses only material of the highest class. It is necessary for a special day. Policy of our shop, only the home production is sold. The Arabic word supposedly means vessels. There are other signs in town with text, but they're either so stylized you can't read them or the resolution is simply too low. On the same note, on the walls of the Gaia temple of the Wii and PS2 version, text reading, I testify that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger is written. This is the motto present in the flags of Saudi Arabia and Somaliland. On the same note, the flag of Shamar is based on the same patterns of countries like Jordan. As for the NPCs, most of them wear traditional garments of Arabic culture. The men usually wear long loose tunics, very much resemblant of an Arab tob. These long robes are commonly seen in these countries both due to modesty and to keep cool in the desert. Over their tunic you may also see short sleeveless vests, as well as a small rounded cap being worn on their head, a Muslim taqiyya, symbolizing religious devotion and cultural identity. Some men in Shamar also carry bags and satchels of some kind. Since this style blends multiple aspects of traditional outfits, it's going for more of a generic Arabian design than anything specific. The women usually wear a long gown with patterned embroidery at the chest and cuffs, which is somewhat resemblant of a thobe or jilbab. In the Levant region, the thobe is also ankle length and are richly embroidered with tatriz motifs, literally meaning embroidery, and can include a variety of symbols like birds, trees and flowers, and even tell stories. It can also represent social relationships and regional identity, although that isn't really considered in-game I think. They also wear a headscarf called a hijab covering their hair and neck. The hijab seen in Shamar is practical rather than ornate, which more closely resembles the Gulf and Levantine styles. Compared to actual Middle Eastern cities, Shamar is clearly more stylized than it is real, but does capture the quote-unquote desert city feel. The ruins and columns in arid sands that depict Petra captures well the archaeological site, while the Shamar hub resembles those mentioned oasis towns across countries like Jordan, which does seem to be the main place of inspiration, considering that Petra is in modern-day Jordan and Shamar seems to be close to arid sands. Empire City, as evidenced by its own appearance and the game files, is a stylized, exaggerated version of New York City, with its skyline of skyscrapers and grid streets being very obviously rooted in Manhattan's real urban planning. Historically, New York developed itself a lot during the Industrial Revolution, producing steel-framed Art Deco towers and a network of avenues during the entirety of the 19th and 20th centuries. This art style is all about geometric shapes, sleek lines and fancy decorations, as well as curved patterns and shiny materials like chrome plating. building. It is also very popular in the Sonic franchise as a whole. While it's used to varying degrees of realism, its objective is to create a sort of whimsical feel in order to detach the environments from reality. In Empire City, the buildings follow a very common urban design at first glance. However, when you look closely, they don't look quite realistic, and that's where Art Deco comes in, with its unique patterns, exaggerated shapes and color palettes, giving them that unique Sonic game look. Multiple buildings seem to be inspired by actual real-life skyscrapers in New York, such as this one and the Chrysler Building. Of course, the Sonic Unleashed version has different colors and patterns. The broad streets and city blocks also reflect New York City's orthogonal plan. However, what you may also notice is the exaggeration of scale. For example, the US is very well known for its highways and roads. As such, the entirety of the Skyscraper Scamper level takes place in large highways that curve and loop and are generally cartoonish in dimensions. The same goes for the buildings, which are so tall that they go through the clouds, with the ground being obscured by them. This is clearly a play on the whole skyscraping name. Even if everything seems to be simpler and streamlined, there's a lot of detail put into small things that you don't really notice, like handrails, the fountain decorations, and the ornamented design surrounding every part of the park in the stage hub, including something as seemingly unimportant as the light posts, thus creating a powerful yet delicate and intricate environment, with everything having that silver and gold color scheme representing the grandiosity of the place. Much like any contemporary cityscape, Empire City does try to incorporate nature into it, with rooftop gardens and parks being present all around. The latter clearly inspired on Central Park, where classic American wildlife such as pigeons can be seen. The NPCs in Empire City, much like in a lot of other places, don't really dress any specific traditional way, nor do they have any specific facial/body features exclusive to the area. However, most NPCs do seem to all have different heritage of some kind, both European, African or Asian, or rather their equivalents in the game's case. You can also see some suits and briefcases here and there, which I'd guess would be the traditional New Yorker stereotype, as well as other people just reading the newspaper, drinking coffee, trying to get information out of you and rapping. Around town you can also see some stands selling hot dogs, pretzels, pizzas, burgers, all stuff you'd commonly find in New York, as well as free newspapers. In one of these kiosks you can also see a magazine featuring Shamar in the front page, and Sonic 06's cover art in the newspaper. Another cool detail is the street names, which are references to other Sonic characters or stages/locations that appear in other games. When you compare Empire City to New York City, the Sonic Unleashed iteration is leaner on detail, as there aren't any specific landmarks represented, such as the Empire State Building, with the game limiting itself on simply representing generic iterations of the Art Deco style. However, it does manage to capture the key motifs, mainly the concrete high-rises, the yellow taxis, and the entire bustling urban energy the city emits, along with the mid-20th century urban architectural style. As such, New York's dense skyline and modern city life are well integrated into Sonic Unleashed's aesthetic, with Empire City also being a concrete jungle of tower blocks, bridges and highways. And lastly, we have Adabat, a location inspired by multiple Southeast Asian cultures. Along with Holoska, it's one of the locations which internal name doesn't reflect what it's based on. The most noticeable influence, especially in jungle Joyride, is the Angkor Wat in Cambodia, a Hindu-Buddhist temple complex. It was in Angkor, the old capital of the Khmer Empire, featuring tiered towers and elaborate bas-relief details. Seriously, there are so many details in the decorations that I feel like it's one of the most impressive human-built structures of all time, especially considering that it was built on the 12th century. While in the game it's clearly not as detailed, it still is very much so and does justice to the real thing, with the stone structures having pointed lotus bud towers and carved guardians. Around the temple, there are also statues of religious symbols like a Naga and Vishnu. In Sonic Unleashed, while no specific symbols are seen, I think, there are some statues of faces in jungle Joyrides. Besides this, there's another style you actually see before, both in the Adabat hubs and in jungle Joyrides. I'm referring to traditional Indonesian architecture, specifically the distinctive saddleback Tongkonan houses of the Torajan people in South Sulawesi. These Toraja houses have curved roofs with the shape of a boat, exactly as they appear in the game. These houses use bamboo and wood with richly carved ends, which also appear in Adabat as carved wooden details and patterns. Every house also has a cloth hanging from the gable, which, despite not really representing anything in the game and just serving to give some color and contrast to the environment, these are actually used as ceremonial banners. They are called sarita and are used in a number of rituals, and can also be worn as headcloths and for other uses depending on the local tradition and the context of the ritual itself. They are also decorated with several woven patterns with specific ancestral meanings. The game doesn't really reflect any of these, as it seems like the banners are shown year-round and are solid color only, disconnecting the ceremonial function and thus attributing it a purely visual role. The NPCs around town do dress more traditionally though. For example, Rudy's pink blouse and pattern wraps resemble the classic blouse and skirt ensembles of the region. Her outfit in general is similar to a lot of other traditional ones from the region, such as the Indonesian kebaya, the Malay baju kurung, and the Filipino barot saya, dressing a pink patterned wrap as a skirt, which is essentially a traditional sarong. She also wears simple flat sandals, which reflects how villagers in the region usually walk barefoot or with basic sandals like these, which are usually wooden. Another notable feature is the basket she's balancing on her head, which serve to transport things like fruit or vegetables and are usually carried this way to keep at least one hand free. What you'll see from the male NPCs specifically is that while they do still wear a sarong, their top is a bit more common, like a tank top or a shirt. There's also a small market in Adabat selling regional products like bananas and others not so traditional like corn. These are stored in bowls, baskets and ceramic jars/pots, much like in real life. You can also see some people fishing, as well as the fishermen from Apotos hanging around at the end of the game, also depicting one of the deepest rooted activities across many parts of Southeast Asia, due to the thousands of islands, extensive coastlines and rivers, and it being an abundant and safer way to get food compared to land animals in these biomes. Adabat is very clearly a merger of multiple cultures, as no place looks exactly like it, but the fusion between the Angkor stone temples and the Tongkon and stilt homes is still authentic. Materials like wood and stone and ornaments are key elements that shape the environment, as well as the beaches, islands, jungles and crystal clear oceans that are usually associated with this region. This depiction makes it feel more like a mythic jungle kingdom of some kind, but also serene and full of cultural background, much like the legacy of the real places it bases itself off. And that's about it for this video. I feel like the research and the amount of detail that goes into making these locations goes very underappreciated and unnoticed, so I hope I managed to shine some light into the reasons behind why and how the countries in Sonic Unleashed are the way they are. Once again, I'm no expert in any of them, maybe only Spagonia a bit, so if I got anything wrong, please feel free to correct me. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications, as these videos take a long time to write, edit, record, research, you name it, so I'd be very grateful. You can also support me on Patreon or YouTube memberships to get early access to videos and your name in the screen at the end, as well as follow me on Twitter if you want, and check out my community tab once in a while where I post quite frequently with video news. And that's about it really. I'll hopefully see you soon.